Tim Legler set to join us. Legs, a former NBA three-point shooting champ and 10-year NBA veteran. He'll be one of the analysts on SportsCenter throughout the NBA Finals. Legs joining us. Legs, how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Dan. It is good to talk to you again, my friend. How are you, man?
I'm doing okay. I got a couple of questions, including this one sent in from a member of our audience. Is Klay Thompson overrated or underrated?
Definitely underrated. No question about it. Do you want me to elaborate on that?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know if these are quick hitters. To me, I think when you talk about basketball and the importance of having five guys play together, and in the context of that setting, you cannot overstate how important it is to have a guy like Klay Thompson that can do what he does in a very short time, very decisively, without needing the basketball a ton, but still be super effective when he gets opportunities. And then the importance of his defense and what that has allowed Steph Curry to be defensively. I mean, the luxury of having a guard that takes on every one of the top point guard assignments defensively, and what that allows Steph Curry to then be offensively, because he's not nearly as worried about foul trouble, getting fatigued, getting worn out by probably the toughest position in the league to guard. Klay takes on that too. So for me, he is still significantly underrated.
But I'm looking at these all-NBA teams. First of all, why is the media voting on something where there's so much money attached to this, Tim? You got guys who either could make $30 million more, or in the case of Klay Thompson, it's going to cost him perhaps over $30 million because he didn't make one of the first three teams.
No, it shouldn't be. I think it's a joke. If I had been, in the room when that was decided, like I was a player rep back in '99 during the lockout, and so you listen to a lot of these sensitive topics when you're trying to get a CBA done. There's no way as a player I would have been in favor of this if I was involved in it today, because of what you just said. You've got guys making decisions, and just look at the voting. By the way, take a look at some of the guys that got votes. That you'll see like others.
Yeah.
I mean, look at some of those names on there, and you're going to tell me that you have media members voting for some of these people. For instance, and I'm not taking a shot at Marvin Bagley because I'm a big Marvin Bagley fan, but he's a rookie and he made the All-Rookie team. He deserved that. Yeah, somebody gave him a third-team All-NBA vote. So you've got, and there's a bunch of others you could sift through that list. So you've got guys taking, and that's the extent to which they're casting their votes, and that you've got money tied into this. It's a big mistake. It's awful for the significance of what it means to the player. And I got another example. Take a look at what it meant in the case of Paul George when he was in Indiana, and he didn't get on that. I don't remember the exact level, or he didn't make third team, or he needed to make a higher level team, whatever it was.
Yeah.
But he didn't get, because of that, he did not get the supermax capability with his own team. And why was that important? Because, look, he might have left anyway, but I know this. That shrunk the difference in financially for him to it wasn't that big of a deal, and now he wanted to get out. He ends up in Oklahoma City. It changes the trajectory of your franchise in some ways. If they offer him a supermax because he makes that team, hey, who knows? Maybe that extra $60-70 million he could have gotten could have been the difference. He re-signs in Indiana. So these are seismic changes that can take place if guys leave, and the ability to pay them a supermax contract, maybe that's enough for guys to stay in certain situations. So I think it's a big mistake to have media affect the money that goes into guys' pockets. That should be up to a team what they want to offer a player.
All right, here's my other big problem when these first, second, and third teams come out. Okay, we're now positionless in the NBA. Wouldn't you say, for the most part, that it's a positionless sport? Because I don't know what Steph is. I don't know what Harden is. I don't know what LeBron is. And I always single out Rudy Gobert, and I don't even know him. And, he's a wonderful player. He's not one of the top 15 players. Why are we putting, you got to have a center, two forwards, and two guards. I want the 15 best players to be rewarded for all NBA. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I think it's silly. It's they've kind of done away with that at the All-Star game, but they still keep it for this, and I think it is silly because you're right. It is positionless, and it should be based on the top 15 players, period, rather than having a pigeonhole that you have to fill certain slots positionally. Now, I will say this. When you look at the list, I didn't have a big problem with the 15 guys that were selected when you start looking at that next list of guys. Obviously, to me, Klay Klay Thompson is a guy there's not 6 guards in the league I'm going to take ahead of Klay Thompson.
Okay, but who do I take out, though, Legs? Am I taking out Kemba? Am I taking out Russell Westbrook? Because I got to take out somebody. Kyrie?
Yeah, probably Kemba Walker. And look, I understand how – here's why this award, how this recognition and how it's determined. It's very difficult to even get 2 guys on any of these teams. I think who had 2 players? Golden State and Oklahoma City. Are they the only 2 teams that had 2 guys? To get a third, I mean, it's almost impossible. So Klay Thompson is the guy that's, because he's not the top of the food chain on that team, he's going to be hurt by that. Kemba Walker is on the top of the food chain in Charlotte, and he's a very good offensive player. But for me, if you went around the league and you had every general manager in the NBA select if they can have Klay Thompson or Kemba Walker, it's probably going to be maybe 30-0 in favor of Klay Thompson.
He's Tim Legler from the Mothership. He'll be the analyst on SportsCenter throughout the 2018-2019 NBA Finals here. It feels like it's every game to game, we're saying, well, such and such is now the best player in the game. It wasn't long ago. It was a week ago when the Greek Freak was the best player in the game. Now, all of a sudden, Kawhi Leonard's the best player in the game. And then it was Steph Curry 2 weeks ago who's the best player. And then prior to that, it was Kevin Durant. We can't make up our damn mind. Is there a best player in the game right now, Tim?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I think it does kind of move around. I really do believe it.
It shouldn't be from game to game though, or week to week.
Not game to game. I think what's happening with Giannis is if you really know the game. I mean, throughout the year, and I know I talked about him all season long, and he might win the MVP, and I'm okay with that. But at the same time, I was pointing out there are significant limitations to his game offensively. The problem is he's not exposed in the regular season because when you get ready to play the Bucks, you didn't think about the Bucks until literally that morning.
Yeah.
And so now you got to try to put together this, pack the lane defense on him. You're not going to pull that off in a one-game regular season one-off when you didn't even discuss it until a film session or a shoot-around before the game. So you're not going to get the level of commitment that the Toronto Raptors are showing where you get to play one opponent over and over and over, and you have a couple days even leading in to the first game. You're much more apt to put together something like this, and they're the one team that's pulled this off against him and exposed what he can't do. And that is beat you from anywhere on the floor. I mean, we've known all along. If you watch him, okay, he doesn't have a great perimeter shot. But it doesn't matter in the regular season because he's still effective, because he's still able to get where he wants to. I call him a center with a handle because that's really where he scores. He scores like a center scores. He beats you up physically inside of 5 feet. He just comes at you with a live handle, long stride. So it's a little different way to play him. The Raptors have said we're going to play a 1-2-2 zone, basically 2 guys at the elbows, 2 at the block, and we're going to force you into all kinds of traffic. And we're going to take advantage of the fact that you don't have an answer offensively to shoot beyond us. You're not a great passer off the dribble. That's why you're seeing all these awkward turnovers when he gets into the lane, and now he's stumbling and he's tripping and he's throwing the ball, into the crowd. He's losing it because he's so frustrated that he can't beat you the way that he has all season, everybody else. So those weaknesses were there all along.
Yeah.
And if you're smart, you had to know that. And I think what this should do for a lot of people, if he does win the award, I think you have to now start to think about what that really should mean. Because for me, an MVP or a superstar in this league, a true superstar, those are the guys that can beat you from anywhere on the floor as a scorer. And if you look at the list of guys that are going to finish in the top 5, top 10 in the NBA in the MVP voting, all of those guys can do it, including a guy like Joel Embiid, who's a 7'1", 280 player. He can beat you from anywhere. Giannis has to add this to his game, and if they lose this series, I'm really curious to see how much determination he puts into the offseason to adding some other way to beat you as a scorer if this is how he's going to be played.
Kawhi more likely to stay or go if they go to the finals?
I thought all along he had a great chance to stay. Look, Dan, you're asking, me and anybody you would ask this question to try to figure out a guy that doesn't really talk. So I don't know how you come up with any sort of indicator of where he's leaning. But here's what I thought from the time he got there. This is a city that he's going to really find himself comfortable in. He's also going to find himself in a comfortable situation from the standpoint he doesn't have the media horde and the intense scrutiny that he's going to get in a lot of cities in the U.S. where He is now have to answer questions every day, be accountable, be responsible, solve this, figure this out. What's the problem? He doesn't want to deal with that. And I think he's in a good place for a city that loves their team. He's going to be beloved and revered playing there. They're going to be good. They're well coached. But he doesn't have to deal with a lot of the things he's going to have to deal with. You talk about going to a market like L.A. as the top guy. Now, if he goes in the shadow of another player like LeBron, it's different. He'll take on all that responsibility, and then Kawhi can be very comfortable in the riding shotgun. He doesn't seem like that's what he wants. I think he's a guy that wants to be the top of the food chain on his team. Toronto seems like a great fit for his personality. So I think for me, it's been 50-50 all along. I could be dead wrong. This could be a one-off where he's known all along he's out of there after the season. I guess we're going to find out on July 1st.
Yeah, it's interesting that Kawhi Leonard doesn't say anything. We're not sure what he's going to do. Kevin Durant never stops talking, and we don't know what he's going to do. You know, they're the two great mysteries there, but those two guys can change the balance of the NBA, particularly if Durant would go east and all of a sudden get Kyrie or Kemba Walker to go to the Knicks, and if Kawhi would somehow get talked into going to the Lakers. I can't. I know LeBron's out there on the recruiting trail. I just don't know what that pitch is going to be, though, Legs. Do you?
No, and I don't. And I don't know if you're Kawhi Leonard, why exactly would you want to do that? That's the part that would make me scratch my head. Like, I understand Kyrie Irving now wanting to go to New York potentially and play with Kevin Durant because it's clear now, we know, Kyrie doesn't want any part of leadership. So he didn't like necessarily not getting enough credit playing in the shadow of LeBron, and he thought he was good enough to go take his own franchise and take them to a special place. He goes to Boston, and it's pretty obvious by the way he's conducted himself and what he has said. He wants no part of trying to lead other players. So for me, it makes total sense. Go to New York, be back in the shadow of a guy like Kevin Durant, very comfortable riding in the sidecar. And that's where his best lane was as a player in Cleveland. For Kawhi, I don't understand why you'd want to do that after leaving San Antonio, going to Toronto. If you lead this team to the NBA Finals or who knows, an NBA title, why would you then want to go play with LeBron and live in his shadow to a certain extent back out in the Western Conference where you've got so many more obstacles to get back to that level? That would be a real head-scratcher. For Durant, I've kind of had the impression going into the season, based on the way he looked in his body language at the end of last year, that he was going to leave after this season. I've thought it all year, never changed my mind on it. I think Kevin Durant is going to leave. I think his mind's been made up about that for a long time. He went out there, did what he needed to, get rings on his resume. He did, I think, like that style from afar. But now I think he's looking at it saying, I'm never going to get enough credit for what I accomplished here as a player because they were already so good when I got here, and it's always going to be Steph Curry's team. So now he's got another challenge he's looking at, and what could be better than going and taking this laughingstock franchise, the New York Knicks, in a big market like that and get them to contention and relevancy. I think he relishes that challenge, and I think Kyrie's going to join him there.
What do you remember about winning the three-point shooting contest back in 1996?
I think the first thing that jumps out, well, two, I would say. Number one, I was a guy because I was undrafted and I went through the CBA in Europe, and I was till some 10 days and cut and sent back, and I was starting to come into my own. And then I got to Washington that year, and I really found a comfort zone. So for me, that was a lot more than a shooting competition. That was validation as a player. And getting on a national stage and letting people know. And I was very confident going there that weekend that I was going to win that thing. So that was the first thing. It meant a lot to me because of the road I had traveled as a player. The second thing it meant was, my daughter was born just a week before my first child was born. So I remember going there and, basically doing that for her. And it's ironic because I remember doing the interview after I won it. And they give you a check for $20,000. I don't know what it is now. It was $20,000 at that time. And they asked me what I was going to do with the money, and I said it's going into a college fund for my daughter. And don't you know, Dan, that thing grew enough over the years. My daughter graduated last May from college, and she's now a second-grade school teacher. And that check went a long way to paying for her college education.
Who was your biggest competition
that year?
Yeah.
Well, Glenn Rice was the defending champion. And so he was the guy that I was kind of targeting. Steve Kerr was in that competition. I think Del Curry was in that. Dennis Scott.
Ooh.
It was a pretty good field.
Yeah.
I remember being in the locker room beforehand, and Cliff Robinson was in it. And Cliff Robinson said, I was being kind of quiet. I had headphones on. I was just getting ready, going through mentally. And I remember him saying, hey, man, you're not talking much over there. You feel a little tight? And I remember saying, all the talking in the world is not going to put the ball in the basket. And went out there, and I felt the balls. I remember walking out there. The balls were brand new. They were right out of the box. Slick. You know what I'm talking about. Slick, that glossy, black, plasticky feeling.
Yeah.
And I was getting a little nervous because we were at the Alamo Dome, man. It was a big venue, and I'm like, okay, these balls are kind of slick. Your hands get sweaty. It doesn't slide off right. Once I started to warm up, I got into a really good rhythm in warm-ups, and I felt very confident. The other thing that I had going for me, I got to shoot first, which was cool because I didn't have to wait a long time after warm-up sitting there with all the commercial breaks and all that stuff. I could go right into it, and I got off to a great start. I think I had 23 in the first round, and I was off and flying, and I was very confident I was going to win it.
That's good stuff. That's a great story. Congrats on your daughter graduating, and good to visit with you again, Legs.
Dan, always great talking to you.
Thank you, bud.
Care.
That's Tim Legler.
For more Dan Patrick Show, tune into Audience Channel 239 on DirecTV. Stream for free on BR Live or download the Dan Patrick Show app.